kind of inspire and maybe even be a role model for the youth of our denomination. And she said, does anybody know of anybody that would fill that bill? And I said, wait a minute. I think I might know somebody. My niece, she went to Colgate University, got her political science and history bachelor's degree there. Then she went into the Peace Corps for 2 years in Western Africa, Burkina Faso, and just did an amazing job there. Then she came back, had a little hiatus, and then started working at the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights, and did that for a little over a year. And that kind of spurred her to go back to grad school at the University of Denver, where she got her master's degree and also worked, and the list would be so long, but worked in a clinic on human trafficking and slavery. And not only all these other things, those things like that she worked with the schooling and that, but she's traveled through the Himalayas. She's got a cousin who's in the State Department in Uganda. She's gone there and learned about some of the problems there and worked a little bit on that. And now she's working for Women Thrive Worldwide in Washington, D.C. She started in this past December there, and is freshly back from Haiti. So she's going to share with you today some of her experiences and some of the insights that she's gained. So would you please extend a warm welcome for Christine, or as we family and friends know her, Chrissy Hart.
Thanks very much, Tim. Appreciate that introduction. And thanks to everybody who played a role in organizing this weekend. It's really, really wonderful to be here today, and it's a real privilege to have an opportunity to share a little bit about my background and experiences as they relate to Unitarian Universalism. So I was raised UU in a congregation in Western New York, the Unitarian Universalist Church, East Aurora. My grandparents were charter members of a neighboring congregation in Hamburg, New York. My dad, who's here today, taught religious education, and my Aunt Margaret is an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister. Today I attend All Souls, one of the largest UU congregations in the country, located in Washington, D.C. Needless to say, my UU roots run deep, and so it feels especially meaningful to be here today to share a little bit about my journey as it relates to global citizenship, to service, and to solidarity in the context of Unitarian Universalism. I'd like to share a few stories from my current work and my experience as a Peace Corps volunteer, and then I'll talk about how some of the lessons I've taken from these experiences relate to Unitarian Universalism. So I'd like to start by sharing with you one of my favorite quotations, which for me gets at the heart of these concepts of service, social justice, and the critically important concept of solidarity. Lila Watson, an Aboriginal elder, offered these thoughts. If you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. If you have come because your liberation is bound up in mine, then let us work together. When I first read these words as a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa, it felt like a light bulb went on. These two sentences got at the heart of what I knew to be true but had yet to effectively articulate. All of us, spinning around on this great green and blue planet, are bound up, as Martin Luther King Jr. described, in an inescapable garment of destiny, a network of mutuality, so that whatever affects one directly affects us all indirectly, our interdependent web of existence. Since then, I have posted Lila Watson's words on a wall in every place that I've lived. I try to carry them with me always to inform my work and the ways in which I approach the world. A complementary idea that I carry with me is a concept that we refer to constantly at All Souls. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s concept of the beloved community. He spoke often of this idea of redemptive reconciliation, of seeking justice through dialogue, understanding, and forgiveness. King invoked this concept largely with respect to race relations in America, but he also traveled around the world to places like India, where his commitment to nonviolent resistance and the redemptive power of love were reinforced. Dr. King said, "Our goal is to create a beloved community and this will require a qualitative change in our souls, as well as a quantitative change in our lives. For me, this concept is relevant to the expressions of injustice that we encounter in the world, from the domestic to that which occurs an ocean away, from a global economic system that keeps poor countries poor, to the political assault on the social contract that we are experiencing in the US with the rise of extreme political factions that promote the opposite of people-centered policies. King's conception of the beloved community is, for me, both an end goal and a means to achieving a more just and equitable world. Let me expand upon this idea and my personal vision of mutuality and solidarity by sharing an experience I had about a month ago. I traveled to Haiti with Women Thrive Worldwide, the Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit that I work for. Women Thrive is a small policy and advocacy organization with the central goal of bringing the voices of women and girls from around the world to decision makers in Washington, D.C. We focus on the ways in which U.S. foreign policy impacts women and girls, and we work to amplify their voices, their stories, and their experiences in order to ensure that international development assistance truly reaches the poorest, most vulnerable, and most marginalized communities around the globe, and that it benefits women and men, girls and boys equally. So my colleague and I traveled to Haiti to facilitate a training in Port-au-Prince with about 30 grassroots civil society organizations focused on gender equality and women's empowerment. We also spent about 10 days traveling around the country to interview both women and men on the barriers that women face in achieving sustainable livelihoods and economic opportunity. Now, this was my first trip to Haiti, but I've lived and traveled all over the world. After college, I served in the Peace Corps in Burkina Faso, a tiny landlocked country in the heart of West Africa. I backpacked through India, trekked in the Himalayas, swam in the rivers of central Guatemala. I conducted field research in post-conflict northern Uganda, and I worked with organizations combating human trafficking in the Philippines. But Haiti affected me in a way that I had never before experienced. It brought into acute focus some really challenging issues, both in terms of concepts of international justice, the global economy, and geopolitics, and some other things on a very personal level. So I'm going to take a minute. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Haiti and its recent catastrophe, but let me back up and just provide a little context. So Christopher Columbus landed on Hispaniola, the island that today is comprised of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, before he ever touched the shores of the United States. With the advent of Columbus and European interest in the Caribbean, Hispaniola became central to colonial-era commerce and, as I'm sure you know, the slave trade. By the late 18th century, African slaves outnumbered Europeans on the island 10 to 1. In 1804, after several failed attempts, Haiti's slave population effectively threw off the chains of bondage and declared their country the first independent Black republic of the colonial era. To put this in context, the first African colony would not achieve independence for another century and a half. From 1804, the trajectory of Haiti's history reflected the sheer will, determination, and courage of conviction of that early revolution, but also frequent turmoil, born of a political structure and leadership that has oscillated from democracy to dictatorship and back again. Add to this unmitigated intervention by foreign powers, most notably the United States, and frequent natural disasters exacerbated by almost total deforestation. This toxic combination has resulted in instability, endemic poverty, and the exploitation of Haitian citizens from within and without. This was evidenced most recently in the devastating earthquake of January 2010 that decimated Port-au-Prince, killing 250,000 Haitians and leaving, even today, some 300,000 Haitians displaced. In the wake of the 2010 earthquake, Haiti's people once again found themselves at the mercy of outside actors. Commitments of funds for the reconstruction of Haiti from governments around the world still have yet to be fully dispersed. By and large, these international organizations have built parallel systems for service delivery instead of working to strengthen Haiti's public institutions. In turn, few Haitians feel the benefit of immediate relief efforts or long-term sustainable development. While some development and relief assistance has been sustainable and well integrated, most has not, leaving a majority of Haitians without access to schools, health centers, and safe water. The Haitian government, severely weakened after the quake, which destroyed most of the government buildings in Port-au-Prince, has in turn abandoned most Haitians. President Martelly, the current president of Haiti, has declared Haiti open for business, which in effect means creating a favorable environment for export-oriented multinational corporations. Needless to say, these activities do not benefit the majority of most Haitians. So fast forward to a little over a month ago, September 2013. I sat in an SUV driving down a road in northern Haiti. I was with some colleagues and several of our Haitian partners who are leaders of a peasant organization. And Haitians, just to let you know, have reclaimed this term peasant, right? And so it means something powerful in terms of, the 70% of Haitians who are smallholder farmers and working to create sustainable livelihoods from the land. So we drove past a large industrial park funded by the U.S. government, international financial institutions, and multinational corporations. The development of these projects has occurred on some of the country's most arable land, in the process displacing hundreds and hundreds of families. As we continued on, our colleague pointed out 1,000 hectares of land, much of which was smoldering as developers burned off crops and vegetation to make way for the cultivation of bananas for export. This land, occupied by hundreds of smallholder farmers growing food to meet domestic needs, will soon feed faraway strangers instead. As we drove on, we noticed piles of rubble scattered on the roadside. We pulled up in front of several family plots where members of 2 households stood next to piles of rubble where buildings and homes had once stood. Bulldozer trucks greeted us as we descended from our cars. We listened as Josette, the matriarch of one family, explained how the machines had appeared one day with no warning. How in subsequent days, government mercenaries, hired thugs, had come to intimidate them, even committing physical violence against some of the men in these families. She said that no information had been provided, no explanation for the sudden seizure of this land that these farmers had rented from the government of Haiti, built upon and farmed, scratching a meager but decent living out of the earth for some 25 years.